Hi, my name is Reverend Renee Kessler, and I'm delighted to invite you here to Beck's Racial Justice Town Hall Meeting, Part 21. That's right, for 2 years, Beck has held these sessions. To all our supporters, donors, and friends, thank you so much for all of your support. I do realize that there are many of you who have never missed a racial justice, and for that, I say thank you. We appreciate your support, but most importantly, we hope that this is making a difference, that we're doing something that is, in our way, really keeping this conversation going, and hopefully, we're learning some things. We're growing, we're doing some things differently. Following the murder of Mr. George Periard, an unarmed Black man at the hands of police, Memorial Day, Monday, May the 25th, 2 days ago from today, was 2 years since we witnessed that horrific crime that played out before our very eyes. Immediately following that, in June 19th, during our annual Juneteenth celebration, Beck began these racial justice conversations. We understood that we needed to do something, and we needed to do it immediately. Interestingly enough, we have not stopped. Each month, we continue these conversations, and we're pleased to be able to continue doing so. So again, I am Reverend Renee Kessler, and on behalf of the Beck Board of Directors, if you'll just give me a moment, I'd like to share their names and thank them for all of their leadership and all of the work that they do to keep Beck going. Our chair is Anna Houston, Frank Robinson, Attorney Arnold Cohen, Sam Anderson, Cecilia Whittington, Dr. Stan Booth, Dr. Mark Dean, Reverend George Dobler, Bernard Drury, Dr. J. Harvey Gillespie, Harold Hicks, former Knox County Commissioner Diane Jordan, Dewey Roberts II, Theresa Venable, and Mr. Irvin Williams. So on behalf of the Beck staff and the entire board of directors, thank you. Thank you for your support, and thank you for all that you do for our community and to continue our pursuit of racial justice. It's interesting because intentionally we did not call this show Racial Injustice. It feels like we know exactly what that looks like. Beck has been in pursuit of racial justice, and we hope that these conversations will be shared across all platforms so that you can continue to find a way to make this world a better place, so that when we write the history books next time, it's not such a struggling history. We've learned some things. Tonight, just before I introduce to some and present to others, my very special guest that I get the privilege of sitting beside tonight, I wanted to just pause for just a moment, because it's intentional that tonight our special guest is here as we, along with the rest of the world, mourn what's happened right before our eyes. 19 children, 2 teachers in Texas, 21 lives taken. Evil and injustice is a heavy burden to bear. So just for a moment, as we begin this discussion tonight, I would just ask each of us just pause as we remember the families, the community, the friends of Texas, Uvalde, Texas, who are right now experiencing the most horrific crime that has ever been recorded in their history books. Thank you. So tonight we get the opportunity to talk to the chief of the Knox County Schools Security Office. And I wanted to, first of all, introduce him, who really in this moment can maybe just help us process what it is we're going. Jason Periard, did I say it right? Thank you. Jason Periard was appointed Chief of School Security effective August of 2021. For the past 9 years, Chief has served as the Vice President of Community Security Initiative for the Jewish Federation of Greater Los Angeles, West Coast, which represents the security-related interests of over 500 Jewish institutions. During his tenure, Chief Periard and his team developed a state-of-the-art intelligence analysis center and several award-winning security products and programs, which are now utilized in cities around the country. Previously, Chief served in the U.S. Marine Corps, thank you for your service, for more than 20 years, culminating in rank as Master Sergeant. During his service, Chief held leadership positions in the military police and worked with the U.S. State Department as a member of the Marine Corps Elite Marine Security Guard Program. He has also served as a special agent for the Naval Criminal Investigative Service and is a chief investigator for the Marine Corps Criminal Investigation Division as an MCAS, Miramar, California, and the National Capital Region Command, Washington, D.C. I apologize if I murdered the name. Chief has earned numerous law enforcement and security certifications and awards from the U.S. Marine Corps, U.S. Army, U.S. State Department, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. Chief holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Maryland, a master's of business administration degree from the University of Phoenix, and a master's degree in organizational leadership from Argosy University. So it is my great pleasure to welcome Chief Periard. We are so delighted, really, to have you here, to have this conversation in this moment. So thank you for being here. I want to remind all of you who are listening or viewing, if you're viewing this live, you are welcome to join us. So please feel free to put a question or a comment in the chat area. If you would like to ask Chief a question, or if there's something that you would like for me to expound on, please feel free to join us. We call it a town hall because we do want it to be an engaging dialogue. If you're viewing this as a recording after the fact, we invite you to always reach out to us at the Beck Center at beckcenter.net with any questions or comments that you might have. We want to continue the dialogue long after we're signed off from the live presentation. So you're welcome to always reach back and touch base with us. Beck has been around since 1975, and we are the only repository for East Tennessee for African American history, state designated by the state of Tennessee. And we're excited to be here with you tonight to unpack so much of all the things that our community goes through. So without further ado, again, I am very, very, very excited to be here tonight with the Chief, because we got some questions to ask. We got a lot to do, but before we jump in, Chief, let me just give you a few minutes to say hello and anything you'd like to do in opening.
Well, thank you so much for the honor of speaking at your speaker series here. I watched some of them in the past before we met and thought they were very innovative, and the way you're very frank and you're very passionate about what you do in the community, and I think that's what gravitated me towards this center, and you were so honored. I was so honored to walk through and be a guest for you, so I appreciate that. And I just appreciate, first of all, I wanted to say my condolences to the families in Uvalde, Texas. Obviously, as a security professional, it's not something I'm unfamiliar with. We've dealt with a lot of tragedy, over the years, and I've dealt with it in different communities, and it never gets easier. It's the unimaginable, and when really all you can do is be there for them, pray for them, and communally pray and try to give them the strength to get through it. But also, I want to say that it has just been a pleasure to come from Los Angeles and be here in Knoxville, because I had no prior knowledge or experience here, had no family here. My wife and I I were looking for a place to land. We had done 14 years in California, absolutely had a great time there, from Southern California to Los Angeles and other areas, and I have family there. But we felt it was time for a change, and we wanted to give a really good school system for Asher and try something new. And we took a little tour of Knoxville, fell in love with it, and luckily the job popped up soon after. And by God's grace, I'm here. Sometimes I pinch myself and say, why me? But I think we all have to do that every day to keep ourselves centered, and it's just been an honor to be able to serve these men and women and try to make us keep moving us forward as a community. So I feel really welcome here, and I thank you for helping me be a part of that welcoming committee and meeting folks all over town and just being an amazing place to live.
Well, we're glad you're here. We're looking forward with great anticipation to the good work that you will do, getting in good trouble as we keep our students safe and as we are spreading equality and justice equally throughout the system, irrespective of skin tone. But I want to go back, and thank you for sharing that with us, your journey to Knoxville. I want to go back to just, again, as we close out the session of our babies in Texas. In Knox County schools, looking at what happened in California, right, and what they're dealing, California, Texas, and what they're dealing with in Texas right now, take me back. What do you think? Is Knox County school system, as chief of security for Knox County school system, are they equipped? Would we have been equipped to deal with a situation like this? These are our babies. These are our elementary school students. But again, we got elementary, middle, and high school. Should, God forbid, something happen and we're in that same situation, where are we equipped to handle a situation like that?
Oh, there we go. I just gotta hit it really quick. Thank you for that. It's a great question. I was doing some on-airs over the last 2 days, and that question comes up a lot. As a parent, I have a child in the school system as well, and so this is personal for me. I try to bring my expertise to the fore and make sure that we're doing everything what I like to call due diligence of security in the field. I mentioned this the other day. Somebody had asked me the question, and it came to mind. When I got here, I had a little over 30 years of experience in law enforcement, 32 years, and security. I've been to some of the most austere places on earth. I've seen a lot of death. I've seen a lot of violence, and I've seen how security work, and I've seen security not work. When I took stock in what we had here in Knoxville, I'm happy to say I was very pleased at how far Knoxville had already come with some of the mitigation strategies, physical security standards that I already had brought into the Jewish and other places. So we were definitely in a good place. Now we're trying to get to a great place because, as you know, security is just a continual improvement process, and we just need to keep moving forward and finding innovative ways to not only mitigate but prevent attacks from occurring. And I can tell you that the mitigation strategies that are best practices for active shooters, we have already been doing some of those, probably I would say most of them, but there are innovative things that we can do to leverage the people element of people, procedures, and equipment. Those are the three elements of security. People are usually the decider as to whether something succeeds or fails. You can put all the equipment in place, but somebody can defeat the equipment by just leaving a door open, right? So the people element is the most important part of security. And I would say my job here moving forward is to create innovations and to put personnel in place that raises that weakness, because people are the weakness in most security elements, because they end up taking paths of least resistance. The farther away from the attack we get, we forget about it, right? Confirmation bias, which is something I fight every day with people, because I try to convince people these are mitigation strategies we have to do. And they tell me, well, it's never happened. Well, that's confirmation bias. Doesn't mean it can't happen here. And we know with these, there's been several Justice Department studies that I've been, that I've read through and studied them over the years, and it's always come down to the same thing. There are pre-incident indicators of violence. Pre-incident indicators of violence have been conserved. They're basically called leakage in the news media. You hear them saying that along the pathway of violence. So there is a long arc of pathway of violence before somebody gets to the point where they become homicide. And what we know from all of the postmortems we've done on every active shooter to date, there has never been an active shooter in a vacuum where somebody just wakes up in the morning without any pre-incident indicators and just attacks and kills children. There is a long arc of behavior. So how can people be a part of that? It's all about, to see something, say something. So I know it sounds trite, and I know we've said it 100 times, but it really does come down to, if something looks out of normal, remember your baseline. Your baseline is your day-to-day life. Everything what's normal in your community. And here's the culture piece. If I work in your community and I don't understand what the normal culture looks like, then I'm not going to be able to identify the anomalies. So that's where people become so important. They have to be culturally competent to work in those communities, but also the people in the community have to have the trust in us to be able to tell us what it is that they're seeing as an anomaly. So there's the people are a big factor in whether security is successful.
That's great, Chief, and I'm going to come back and circle back on some questions that you just talked about, because you made some points. There were key points that I want to transition over to some other lines of questioning. But let me just start, because as I mentioned as we started the show, we began this in our pursuit of racial justice. And I always ask this question to every single panelist that comes on. And I am going to get the perfect definition. After 2 years, we're going to take every definition that people have ever given us, and we're going to create what that real answer is for all of us that we can all agree with. But if I ask you, what is the definition of racial justice? What is racial justice? You would say,
I can honestly say I've never been asked that question. It's an excellent question. I think in order for you to understand the people that are across the table from you and whether you can trust them, they need to understand where the problems are. Where do we start together? Where do we find commonality? Racial justice to me, and I'm going to define this in the widest way I can possibly define it, because I don't have a lens to look through to say I've had the minority experience, but I can say racial justice to me is not only making sure everybody has equal opportunity to resources and education, but putting systems in place that actually prop up those folks and give them a fighting chance. Because as we know, systems tend to help the most people they can possibly help, and therefore are flawed because there's other people that are left behind. So what I've always said is you treat everybody, everything for me started with my family, my mother and father. Were just amazing. They brought us up to treat everybody with respect. I remember going to the store for a loaf of bread with my father, and it would take an hour and a half to get home because my father would talk to everybody on the way home, and I'd be like, Dad, you don't know that person. Doesn't matter, son. That person is a person. And he would just talk to everybody and just get an understanding of people and just treat them well and stop at the side of the road and help people and really be his brother's keeper. And that's the foundation of what I believe. And then beyond that, racial justice to me, I've learned over the years working in different cultures is if I don't know the culture I'm working in, and I don't know the specific uniqueness of that culture, which makes it beautiful, then I don't know what the anomalies are that I can look at ahead of time so that I can keep that community safe. So everywhere I've gone, I studied the culture that I was in. When I was in Japan for 4 years, I did several college courses on Japanese culture. I learned, Kubi will tell you, I learned a little bit of Japanese, although very broken, so don't make me say it. And wherever, and whether it was in Los Angeles working with the different churches on the east side, the Hispanic churches and AME churches, working with them, I've always found that security has a common thread through our culture. Everybody, it's the one thing that unites us. We all want to be secure in our daily lives. We all want to be able to flourish and send our kids to school and feel safe, right? When that thing is violated, it doesn't matter what culture you are, it sends a ripple through that community. and it really affects everything. It creates trauma. It reverberates through generations. And I think racial justice to me is doing everything you can to make sure everybody has a fair shake and a chance at success, at education, at prosperity, and just treating people, the way Jesus wants us to treat people.
So, Chief, I want to unpack that some more, because I love how you talk about culture, and we're going to come and talk about the committee in just a little bit. But first, I want to bring out what's been would be the elephant in the room, I think, if we could say that, and that really is the tragedy at Austin East. Now, I know this is going to predate you, but in August of 2021, almost, at that date, there was, of course, the incident at Austin East High School. I'm sorry, it's April. Yeah, it's April. We just passed the 1-year anniversary. It's still overwhelming to think about. All right, so we got a 17-year-old, Anthony Thompson Jr., and we know here in Knoxville that there was a 17-year-old. There was a school shooting where the 17-year-old was shot and killed inside of the school at Austin High School in Knoxville, Tennessee, by a police officer. And so, again, Chief, while I know you were here, I'm sure you're aware of the situation. And I guess as the chief now, and as the person sitting in that seat, and looking at history 1 year ago and what happened, can you help us unpack how we go forward, and what are some of the things, some lessons learned, and things that we need to know that you're committed to ensure this never happens again?
I think that I got the button down. Thank you. It's a great question, and I love the fact that you're saying looking forward, because I'm a big fan. As a fatal pragmatist, I always say that how do we get forward from here? I don't want to stay in the past. I do want to learn from it, but I want to move forward. It's very important that our schools, I talk about the banking industry all the time. And if you indulge me for a second, the banking industry spends billions of dollars protecting its money. We spend a fraction of that protecting our babies. And one of the things that we have to change about how we educate is making sure we always maintain our access controls of that school. While your babies are in the school, we always harp on the fact that there's singular points of entry, access control procedures. Students have to be signed in and out. We need to keep accountability of those students. We know that truancy is the beginning stages of a pathway to criminality. We also know that those are key indicators. Doesn't mean they're going to do it, but we know that those truancy problems are the starting point of bigger problems for that child. So we can avoid that by making sure kids are signed in and out. Even if they're 17 years old, they should be able to just come and go when they please. You can't have a system like that where you're losing control of all the protections that we put into place for that school. So what I'm trying to do here is, one, I talk with Tammy on a weekly basis. I check in with her. We've talked multiple times on strategy. Anytime that she feels like there needs to be systems in place, I listen to the people on the ground. I've always told every principal, trust your gut. If you think it's important, then I'm not going to try to question whether it is. I'm going to say it's important enough for that person. So I'm going to trust that gut. We have what's called a limbic system that basically helps us survive. And it has file folders and shortcuts. And that's when you feel the hairs in the back of your neck and you're like, that didn't sound right. Why am I getting in this elevator? Well, all those things have to be listened to. So moving forward, single points of entry, access control, signing in and out, visitor vetting systems, monitoring our cameras, not just putting cameras in place and spending money, but putting people behind those cameras, and communicating with the staff at all times, because the staff knows these kids better than anybody else. Making sure that those communications are happening periodically and listening to our administrators and making sure we give them the resources they need. And those are really the things that I'm trying to push forward. And one of the first places I went was AE, and as they opened back up for the new school year, it was a very challenging time because there's a lot of trauma there, obviously, and we're trying our best to work through that. But I think that those are things moving forward.
Thanks, Chief, and I can appreciate, looking at processes, things that we could have done beforehand. So I guess I like to say fire prevention, right, rather than putting out fires. But if you'll indulge me, let's say that we had fire protection. Let's say we had all of those causes. Can we talk about the fire that then grew after that? Because no matter what, whether we had the processes in place or not, there was a situation where the police handled this. And so I guess my question is, looking at history, in the event that for whatever reason, the situation occurred again, I guess I'm looking at how it was handled. Because the reality of it is, you and I know both well that no matter how many processes we put in place, there's going to be some loopholes to get around it. So then the question becomes, when that happens, how do we make sure our babies get home safe and alive? So can you take me from, yes, if Ms. Campbell and all the principals throughout Knox County School Systems put the processes in place, and what's the response of security and police, notwithstanding something does happen?
Well, we need to understand we can learn a lot from the Israelis. I lived in Israel for a year. I have a family there. And I can tell you that we have to reset quickly. There's a survival mechanism to that, but we also need to understand that the trauma goes on for a long time, and we need to be there in the community to deal with that trauma. Because the trauma can have second and third order effects, right? You can have suicides, you can have violence, kids start to feel like they don't trust the system. There's a lot of public engagement that you have to do to build that trust back. And just from an outside perspective, because I think the TBI and the DA's office did a good job of looking at what happened. And from an outsider's perspective, I think coming in here, my biggest focus was making sure that we kind of learn lessons from the Israelis in the sense that we need to reset, but we need to continue engaging and continue dealing with that trauma and getting the help that those folks need to build it. Because once something bad happens in your life, you ever been in a car wreck? Okay. When you get back in that car life, you're not the same, right? And it takes a very long time for you to build that confidence back in the system, whether it's a car around you or whether it's the community that you live in. So regardless of who's to blame or what happened, that trauma and that trust needs to be dealt with. We need to help those people through those processes, give them resources, but also we need to build trust back, right? That shouldn't happen again. We should try to find ways to prevent it. Unfortunately, some levels of violence, it's a mitigation game versus a prevention game. That's why I say the gold standard is prevention. I can't guarantee prevention. I always tell people, I used to tell rabbis all the time, hey, how do I keep a completely safe synagogue? Like, shut it down. As a realist, I can tell you the only way you're going to be completely safe is if you lock yourself in your house, and even then I can't guarantee. Life is dangerous. There is violence. There's violence in our communities. Some of that violence spills over into the school. We need to put mitigation factors in touch points where actually tripwires happen, and we can actually interrupt that. That's where I get into the restorative process. We've talked about, criminality and prison pipelines and how kids are used in this are sent to the criminal justice system. It seems like more so than in the past. I think that we just need to keep, as a school system, and we're doing a good job, especially with new leadership coming on. We're actually going to be putting things in place that are we've embedded restorative processes in every school now. Our culture folks are incredible, and they've done a great job of, instead of just everything being a suspension or detention, there's actually restorative processes that happen right away. For a lot of these kids who have trauma, they've witnessed violence and almost on a daily basis in their community or at home. Some of them don't have a safe home to go to. So how do we provide those things when we deal with those traumas before those things become acting out, where there's a criminality that there's no turning back from, and then there's no justice system, and then there's no redemption there. So we're trying to make it much more restorative. My officers can be a part of that. just building those relationships, you know.
Thanks, Chief. I want to remind everyone, if you're watching live, you're welcome to put a question or a comment in the chat box. We'll be happy to answer those or ask those questions. So please feel free to do that. And if you're watching us on recording, please know that you can always reach out to the Beck at XXI.net and let us know any questions or comments you might want to have. One of the things that I know I was confused about the police security in Knox County or not the city police in Knox County. Can you help us understand, because there's a lot of people who don't understand, you're the chief of security for Knox County Schools, and those security officers, which I want you to tell us the names of those, because I know y'all use a lot of alphabets too, but who are the police the officers that are patrolling the schools that are under yours? Who else is in the building? And what are they called? So that we can unpack who the security system total is in schools, and particularly in our schools of concern right now.
It's a great question. There's a lot of confusion by our community when we're doing this outreach for the memorandum of understanding. And in doing that, we found there was a lot of confusion as to what a uniform meant, right? Does a uniform always mean law enforcement? Does it mean security? Is an SRO an SRO? Is an SRO? And I think there was a lot of confusion as to, because it looks redundant, right? And so I'll start with an SRO, a school resource officer, is a sworn officer of either KPD or KCSO. These are law enforcement officers.
Knox Police Department or Knox County Sheriff's Office.
Yes. So
yes,
in the division, in our district, in our county, we have 2 jurisdictions of law enforcement. So depending on where the school is, that jurisdiction will post a school resource officer in a high school or middle school. Our SSOs are KCS, Knox County Schools employees.
And SSO is?
School security officer.
Okay.
So, yeah, let's get all the acronyms out. And school security officers are not sworn law enforcement officers. They are bonded by the Sheriff's Department to do security operations in our schools. So the difference between the two, I would liken to think of us as the arm of the school district to keep people safe and secure in their environment. So that's a much broader mission than what law enforcement has. Law enforcement is mandated by and governed by what they're sworn to protect and uphold, and that's the law. So think of us as procedures, policies, and also the law. So we have a much broader mission in the schools.
So help me unpack. At each school, you have what combination of, and just so they don't get confused, because I still get confused with the S and MOUSE, so that they don't get confused. How many police officers or sheriffs, which are sworn officers that work for the police department or the sheriff's department, because we're not metro government, so we understand that. And then how many are officers under Knox County Schools? How does that makeup shake out in the different schools? Because I think that may help us understand. Is that different at the different levels?
Yes, and there's a lot of factors that factor in to who's at each school. So the general mission of all 3 entities is to keep a uniformed armed officer in every school. That's our mission. That's been our what we try to, and we've done a very good job of that. I think there are probably rare occasions where we have to gather school and then cover it in an area with 2 or 3 schools. But I will tell you, and I can't get into the actual deployment because it would be something that would be that somebody could use to their advantage. But I will tell you this: I can tell you from my numbers, thanks to the district supporting my expansion of your organization, we're going to be able to put a SSO in every single Knox County school in the entire county, and 2 in some schools based on need. So now there'll be redundancy, because right now, if I lose an officer because of my numbers, and COVID really killed us, we had 15 officers out in one day because of sick with COVID. And during the time it's decimating, I have to pull officers from several schools, and we have to move SROs into those areas, things like that. So there's a lot of dancing going on. Now with my numbers being raised to 126, which is our new top out rate, it's a 1.4 million budget increase. I think we're somewhere around 7 million to 7.7. And that will enable us to not only absorb absenteeism, because we have absenteeism like everybody else. I can't call a substitute teacher when somebody's sick. I lose an officer, and it takes them a year to make that. So now we'll be able to have a redundancy in place to put patrols back out for the first time in several years, to actually have officers at every single school. So our KCS division officers, SSOs, will be in every school.
Thank you for that. So now let's talk about if you're gonna have more officers in these schools, and you began this conversation talking about culture, right? And how we place officers within schools, because we know that, you know, there are some schools and relationship is everything, but culture is different at every school. And so help me understand what is Knox County Schools doing to ensure we're getting the right mix? Because I'll be honest with you, there are gonna be some people who say, we don't need more policing. We don't need more of these people here. And so help us understand, number one, why we need more there, in addition to the fact that you've got now the opportunity, you do have absenteeism to have a pool. But why it's important to have the numbers there, which some people, particularly the African American community, may see as intimidating, or yet another, feel some kind of way about having so many police officers there in the school system with the kids. So they may not view it as safety as much as they view it as something else, more negative in terms of policing over policing. And then also I want to talk about what does it look like in terms of placing them into these different schools with different cultures. And then I'll specifically talk about the Black schools, right, and what that looks like.
There we go.
They want to say why you were getting us to say, not necessarily Black schools, but certainly schools that have a predominantly Black and brown population.
Absolutely. No, it's a great question. And it's not, again, you were fair enough to point out, it's not about putting more people on the ground. What it is, it's about absorbing absenteeism so that there's an operator or a responsible party who's running the security operations for that site. I will take exception to one thing you said. You said it's about, you were talking about policing. Our officers are not policing. Not that that's a dirty word. I mean, community policing is a really great concept. You need law enforcement. You need that mission. What our folks are doing is running the security operations at the school. So think of it as a much more broader term of the mechanic versus the driver, right? So our officers are actually the spearhead to making sure those people elements don't get out of hand. People propping doors open, checking windows, checking to see if people on the property aren't supposed to be there, being a force multiplier for the law enforcement when needed. But all of those things are to say you need somebody who keeps the ship running, not just a policeman standing out in the front of the school. And who has all those relationships. Because by the way, police don't have the resources to do what the school district is trying to do. They have such a huge mission as it is. And frankly, the less that they have to do day to day with the kids so that they can focus on the law enforcement aspects, the better it is for them, so that the resources can be put in the right place. We can then do the day-to-day stuff like access control, like meeting with the kids with an admin person to make sure that they're safe. Stay with them if they have a domestic issue that we're doing. So we do that stuff on a daily basis that bogs down law enforcement. And because we represent the school, we don't have to put them in the criminal justice system. We have all these alternative things that we work with school culture so that we're able to restore them in many ways so that they can move on and actually have redemption.
So talk about that culture though, because again, the culture is going to be different at each different school. And so help me understand how you are, looking at that. And I'll just, before you answer that, I will say that I agreed to chair the Chiefs Committee to help him begin to look at several things with regard to his position here. He wanted a committee put together to help give him input as well as to advise him and the department on practices, particularly as it relates to racial justice with regard to our students of color. And so this committee is a very diverse committee. We meet monthly and we have a conversation and discussion about some things that we would like to see. And some of the things that we talked about, they fall into 3 areas that you're looking for. We talk about retention, retaining the officers that we have. We look at recruiting, getting new folks in that look black and brown and other culturals, and also about culture. Now, we talked about it that until the culture changes, it's really difficult to retain good officers, particularly black and brown officers, who may feel like their culture is not conducive just as an officer within your department. So that if we can get the culture right within the department and at the different schools, then we can begin to maintain and retain those great officers that are there, particularly those of color, and then begin to do some recruiting. Because it's difficult to bring people in. It is difficult to train people who are already there to stay, to want to stay, if the culture is bad. And we know that we've got some cultural challenges.
Thank you for mentioning the Diversity Council. Has been hugely supportive and really helpful for me. And frankly, we, in honesty, your frankness and passion towards getting to the truth of things, I appreciate, because I'm a very frank person myself. And we've had some conversations where you said, "Hey, I don't trust you," and I said, "That's cool. That's all right." We laugh about that, but she's right. I mean, she has no reason to trust me. I'm an outsider. I came in here just because I'm from LA doesn't mean anything. But I'm a person who said from the very beginning that I'm not interested in platitudes. I'm not interested in trying to get media attention for this. I want to make substantive changes, because what I saw when I got here was there's obviously some problems with recruitment, retention, culture, because we don't have a representative cross-section of race in my department. We don't have folks in leadership positions of color, which is a problem. And frankly, there was a lot of issues with the department that just felt wrong when I got here. We have a lot of great people though in the department. We have just amazing individuals who want to do better. They just needed somebody to come in and say, "Okay, here's the problems. We need to fix these. Let's get some education. Let's get some awareness, and let's get some cultural competency or responsiveness so that we can actually better serve the community that we so want to, but we just can't see." A friend of mine told me the other day, she goes, "A lot of this is like driving a car." I'll go back to the car thing again. Everybody has implicit bias. Everybody has biases, and they're like the blind spots in the car. You may be driving the car as safe as you want, and really your heart's in it. You want to stay on the road, but you still have those blind spots. So she said you have to check those blind spots with everything you do. And that's really the way I see things. Is if I can teach my folks to check their blind spots with everything they do, and they serve with a good heart, I think we can move towards a better culture in the department and actually make those students' colors feel like they're being represented, fairly.
And so yes, we have a lot of work to do, and so I'm thankful that you are willing to listen and willing to be here to do this. So that's very important. And I have met some great officers in Knox County Schools, and I might mention Nicole Kimber is an outstanding officer, and she is managing the office, helping me to manage the office there and leading the committee alongside me. So I appreciate Officer Kimber and several of the other officers that also come to the meeting of color, and all of the different nationalities are actually represented. So it's a beautiful day, and we're very appreciative of that. I want to talk a little bit about this whole idea though, and I know that, you talked about your upbringing, you talked about, how you were raised and how important it is to treat people right and to treat people good, and especially our kids, because, I'm really concerned about our children. And one of the things why I think culture is so important, not only within the department, but then how the department treats our students at school, even though their role is to keep safe, they're part of the team, if you will. One of the challenges that we know as Mr. Dewey Roberts is coming through the back door there. Come on in, Dewey. Welcome to the back. That's when you never know who might show up. it is a surprise guest, and you know what? And he's all dressed up too, so he must want to come and do racial justice because it's Mr. Dewey Roberts, who's also a board member of the Beck Center. But Dewey is the longest serving president of the NAACP. And I always say that Dewey's biggest claim to fame is his dad, who's an extraordinary educator. So welcome. It's when you know you're at Beck when someone just shows up out of nowhere. That means you're here at Beck. So we're definitely glad to have Dewey walk into the house. I was talking about the culture of schools, and I was talking about how, you know, I'm gonna say it like this. There are some buttons that some people know how to push. I have some buttons that you can push. And I'm thinking about our young kids and our students. They have some buttons, and all the time with systemic racism and cultural biases and all those kinds of things. Some people know how to push our children's buttons. And that's why I think culture is important, relationship is important. And so I really want to hone in on how do you get, after having you personally being a great person and all that good stuff, how do you change a culture? How do you change a culture of it?
I think it's steering a battleship. It takes some time. And a part of it is leading by example. I personally follow certain leadership, which to me is biblically based, and it goes to golden rule, and it goes to being first to be last. And so leading by example and telling people, the first thing I told my senior staff was, you will be a servant. There is no choice in that matter. If you're not here to serve the folks below you who serve our children, then I want you to step up. And luckily they all took me up on staying. But everybody wants to serve. They're not natural. We don't naturally get there. But I think servant leadership is the beginning of that. Leading by example. The people take cues from leaders. So if I walk in one day and I use a disparaging comment, if I make a disparaging comment about a racial group, that's all it takes. The culture is ruined in that organization because I set the tone and I said it's okay to make those comments. From day one, I put a biblical verse on the wall and I basically said, this is what the standard we're going to lead. We're not going to use profanity. We're not going to use make off-color comments. We're going to treat each other with respect at all times. We're going to have fun because I have to lighten it up because it gets really tough over time. People get they absorb. And so we have fun in the office, but they know that there's a limit to how we talk to people. But they also know they better learn about each other. They better be culturally sensitive and responsive to each other because that's the key to getting our folks below us that serve the community to do the same thing. So in everything we do, we're being watched and we're being judged by that, and that's fine. I want to be held to that standard because every day I drive in when I'm saying a prayer to myself to give me the strength to put my armor of God on. I know that I'm going to fall short, but I got to do the best I can to be a servant leader for these folks. Because if I don't do it, then it's just words that I'm saying.
So it's that top-down leadership that you're willing to do that. So as we're wrapping things up here, and thank you so much for joining us, those of you who are watching, we appreciate you so much. What do you think is the most important issue to achieving racial justice for all? What do you think is the most important issue?
Humanizing each other, talking to each other, engaging with each other. I think you can say that the internet has kind of created this amazing, unstoppable force of information, but what it's done is taken the humanity away from everything. I think we can all agree on that. When there's a keyboard between us, it takes away the humanity of the individual you're talking to. When you're face to face with that person, you're sharing bread, breaking bread together, you're talking about things you both worry about. You've humanized that person. I think that's the first step to what Barack Obama said about loosening your grip. If you just, take something about the fist and take, that person's hand, you just loosen yours. I think that's important. I think you build understanding now. And those are important aspects of starting the conversation towards racial justice and just respecting each other.
I love that, but we're about to start the school year, so you haven't been here for a whole full school year yet. So starting in August, this is the summer, and we're trying to get things going, but the school year is gonna kick off again. And it's been a tumultuous last couple of years, it really has been, particularly for our Black and brown babies. Help us understand when you start back your first full school year next year, what can we expect, particularly as it relates to this population of students that we're concerned most about right now. Not that all of our children aren't important, but we're clear about what we're looking to pursue.
Hopefully what you'll see is, my promise to you is this, is that the officers there will be engaged. They will be somebody that over time, hopefully you'll feel like you can trust and you can talk to when you're having that bad day, you need somebody to talk to, and hopefully you'll see some changes in the fact that they're not overwhelmingly in presence, but they are there when you need them. And that's really a balance that we always try to strike, is that we're not sitting there creating an oppressive environment of, a Joe attitude, but that they're just one of the staff members that you can come to and talk about your day or what the game was like last Friday. So that's what
So the community is watching. There are people who will watch later. What do you say to the community? What help do you need from the community, particularly for our community of colors, in terms of helping you do what you do, but most importantly, that our children feel safe, respected, treated equally, and have every opportunity and excellence within the school system for what you're responsible for? What would you say you need from the community? What's the takeaway? And what's your commitment to the community?
That's great. I would say to the community that we are responsive. So if you have any issues with officers or the way operations are run at the school, we take advice from the community on a daily basis. You can reach out to me at my office. Nicole will answer usually the phone, and she'll make sure that I respond. She holds me account for that. And also, if I would ask you, just like I ask every parent, if you see or hear or read something that sounds suspicious, please tell somebody about it. Don't just assume someone else is going to take care of it, because those are the things that if we get to it early enough, then we can prevent that child from making a bad decision, or we can, better yet, prevent the person on the outside from attacking that child. The only way that I can do my job is by having an open dialogue with you and by working with you. And I promise you as a parent that you can feel safe that your kids are going to school in the fall. And I thank you for the privilege of serving this community.
Thank you so much. And, I guess as we close this up, because that hour goes really fast, and thank you so much for being here. And one of the things that we talked about, Chief, in the committee that you have formed, your task force, your committee to help advise you, is that we would be going to the school systems, the individual schools, particularly the schools with children, predominant children of colors, in schools that have a large population of children of color, and talking with the teachers and the students, having our meetings there so that they can give us feedback. So now as Bree goes through the back room, hi Bree. That's what happens when you're at the Beck. You just never know who's going to cut through and say hello. So as we begin to, look at how the schools are operating, I wanted to let the community know that at the individual schools that the chief has agreed, we meet here at Beck to have a frank conversation with other members of the community. And we have members of the Asian community, we have members of the Latinx community. We have a wide variety of people, officers in the school system, community folks that are on the committee, that we would then take those meetings to the schools, for example, to Fulton High School, to Austin East High School, to Vine, and some of the schools, and also some of the other schools with large populations of brown children, and really make sure that we're dialoguing. So I wanted to open that up so that the community know we're doing that, and if you'd like to be a part of it anyway, you're welcome. I feel like, hey, the more people we hear from, the more we can make sure that we're holding each other accountable for what we said we would do. Is that fair? All right, any final remarks, Chief, before you go? You know, I love getting people on record of stuff. So here's the last thing. I always say a year from now, when we're sitting in this chair, you're gonna look back over a year and you're gonna say, Renee, listening audience, I promise you this, that 1 year from today, if Renee has me back in the seat talking, here's the thing we're gonna have achieved. And I'm gonna be very proud of it. You would say,
Renee, in a year from now, you're going to see positive changes to my department, and you'll be able to say to me, I trust you.
Okay. That's great. That's great. Good luck with that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us today. And remember, you're always welcome at the Beck. As you can see, you can just drop by, stop by. Beck is the place where Black history and culture preserved, conserved, nurtured, taught, and continue. We're proud of the work that we're doing here, but we can't do it without you. So please keep supporting Beck. Couple things that are coming up I want to remind you of that I'm excited to announce. Next week, on next Thursday, here at the Beck, we're going to have the Black Caucus of State Legislatures here. That's right. It is free. It's open to the public. So we will have the Black Caucus legislatures, both from the Senate, State Senate, and the State House of Representatives, along with our representative who is featuring this with us, and that's Representative Sam McKenzie. So you're welcome to come here to Beck. I believe it's at 6 or 6:30 a.m. Yeah, check out the Beck website. I can't remember. I think it's at 6 or 6:30, but check it at 6 o'clock. I think it's at 6 o'clock. And when in doubt, come early. So that's next Thursday. Beck has the summer series going on right now with the Jazz Festival. So you can come by and hear some jazz with Brian Clay. First Friday of each month. We started that last month in May. So in June, just stop by the Beck on the first Friday. So after the Black Caucus of Legislature, Friday night, we will have our first Friday in June with Brian Clay and his special guest, and then we'll have one more month in July. But don't forget, Beck has a whole lineup of Juneteenth events coming up. The summer is going to be hot. You're going to enjoy all the events that we have. I guarantee you, we are not going to stop pursuing racial justice. I hope you read your Beck e-newsletter today. It was outstanding. Beck is celebrating 40 years along with the city since the 1982 World's Fair. Today we featured all of the Black history of the World's Fair that we wanted to summarize, and we want to shout out Brianna Flanagan, who wrote that extraordinary article. So thank you so much for being here on behalf of the entire Beck Board of Directors, the Beck staff, and I'm shouting out to K1B Bullard, who's over there doing all of our technology. I'm shouting out to the chief here that took his time to be here with us today and to keep conversating with us. We're in pursuit of racial justice, and we will not stop. Next month, we'll see you on June the 17th for our racial justice conversation. It'll be our third year. Is that right? Second or third year? Which one is it? The first year we did it in 2020. We did it in 2021. This will be the third year that we've done the racial justice conversation on Juneteenth with the same group. So every year we ask them, all right, now we're a year from the last year, what's happened and what's changed. We're going to be checking back in with those folks. So stay tuned. Mark your calendars for a whole litany of events at the Beck. And if you need a reminder, check us out at beckcenter.net. Thank you so much. Have a great evening, and looking forward to seeing you again real soon.